Hey guys, this is Paul, the founder and host of the Man Bits podcast, straight up chat about men's health. And today I'm going to bring to you a book review, which I don't often get time to sit down and record. So today's book, I've just about finished it. I've got about 2 pages to read, and it's The Mask of Masculinity by Lewis Howes. So I'll be taking you through some of the detail of what he writes about, how he writes, and whether or not I recommend this book and what my true thoughts and feelings are about the book. So I'll talk about that at the end, but I'll take you through some of the content and to give you an idea as to what's actually in the book. So Lewis Howes, he is the host of the podcast, The School of Greatness. That's how I found him. I watch and listen to that podcast. He interviews successful entrepreneurs, thought leaders, influencers, high-level, high-performing athletes, and they share some of their stories, their journeys for the listeners. And it's quite an inspiring podcast. There's never an episode that I don't take something away from the listen. So yeah, it's a good podcast. I've actually got the other book that Lewis wrote. It's The School of Greatness. This is not just a Lewis fanboy fan club review. It's an honest review, but I do have his other book as well. That's a good book. So Lewis, he was an athlete. He talks about this, that he was an athlete for much of his younger life. He became a pro footballer. He then moved into business, taking some of those skill sets of high-performing athlete into business. He's now a high-performing businessman, very successful and huge following as well. He talks about, in his preface of The Mask of Masculinity, what inspired him to write the book, and one of the things was a documentary called The Mask That You Live In. And I've seen that documentary now. I've now gone out and watched it since I read this book. And I see what he's talking about. He quotes, "Have you ever watched a movie or read a book that hits you like a ton of bricks? Something that just shakes everything you think you know about this world. Something that feels like it was especially made for you." Well, that documentary was what it was for me. And so that's Lewis's words about what inspired him to write the book. And having watched that documentary, which completely unpacks and unravels the very thread that we think society is built on around masculinity. What we think is masculinity is purely a concept that has been built from language and narratives from our birth, from very young age, through the generations of men. Thinking that it's okay, thinking that we shouldn't cry, thinking we shouldn't show emotion. That's all a narrative that we've heard and witnessed in our environment and our upbringing. And that's, as it manifests through life, into adulthood, that veil of masculinity or that mask of masculinity that we feel we have to wear to protect ourselves from vulnerability can manifest itself into depression, anxiety, worst case, suicide, anger, violence. And so we see so many examples of that. I mean, just look around, look at the media at the moment. There's so much violence out there currently, and that comes from mostly men, to be honest. So I'll take you through some of the details of the book now. There are 9 masks that Lewis talks about, and he says that we wear a mask which protects ourselves from showing our true self. It's a protective mask, and only when we really take that mask off will somebody see our real self. And what I really like about this part is that not only does he talk about the masks that we wear, but he says, well, how do we take that mask off and actually show our true self? And by doing that, what Lewis does in this book is he talks very personally about his experiences with trauma. And I won't go into the detail of that. I'll let you read it for that. But he describes a very personal trauma of his own and how he took the emotion related to that trauma into his adulthood and how that manifested for him. So it's a really good way that he broke it down. Now, the first mask he talks about is the Stoic. Now, the Stoic is, I think it's common that most sons will see this in their fathers, is that the father doesn't show much emotion, much affection. They are the wall, the barrier. They're very calm, very still, very unshakable. That's the Stoic attitude. And it definitely resonated with me. I think many men they hide behind this mask of stoicism. I think that's why perhaps Lewis chose this as number 1. For me, this is one of the main reasons I think that suicide rates are so high among men. 75% of all suicides are men. And it's many reasons why I launched my podcast is to address that issue. We talk about men's mind health, mental health, physical health, and financial wealth, and how that relates. So that's the Stoic, the mask of the Stoic. The second one he talks about is the athlete, the mask of the athlete, which obviously for Lewis was very close to him. And it is for me too. He describes it as the modern day gladiator. I remember when I was very young playing rugby on the playing field, I would always make so much noise. I would be the guy who was the loudest on the field. I wanted everybody to know I was the athlete. And then into my adulthood, I started professional dancing and won gold medals. And I remember that it was that gold medal I was after. I needed to prove to someone that I was the athlete. And for any guys that are watching this who think that dancing isn't athletic, think again. Now, there are very obviously, as we think of these masks, I believe there's many positives of wearing certain masks as well, because wearing that mask of an athlete, for me, it taught me how to focus. It taught me about health and fitness and dedication and commitment. But there's also negative sides in that society thinks that if you're not athletic, if you're not sporty, then you're not manly, you're not masculine. So it can have a really negative effect as well. Now, number 3 is the material mask. That's all about, as Lewis says, a man's net worth is what becomes his self-worth. And so we use toys, we use material goods to show our level of masculinity. You ever seen that guy with a car and somebody will say, you'll always hear somebody say, excuse me, you'll always hear somebody say in the background, oh, he's obviously trying to compensate for lacking in some other area of his life by driving that kind of car. Well, maybe he is, maybe he isn't, but it's very dangerous because if you use material wealth to express your manliness or your masculinity, and then you lose that wealth, then you've lost your identity, and then you're isolated and you're lonely. Using material goods and wealth to represent your masculinity is a false representation of yourself. Number 4 is the sexual mask. If you've ever bragged about your sexual conquests, you're probably wearing the sexual mask. Love them and leave them. One night stands are for me. I'm not into relationships. Well, let me tell you, I know friends of mine who are well into their 40s now who, good-looking guys, really approachable, funny, intelligent, successful, and would make really great partners and husbands and what have you, but they still sit with this sexual mask on. They still brag about their conquests, and one day they're going to have that real conversation with themselves to say, actually, what I really want in my life and what I believe people really want in their life is love. They'll be lacking in that area because they've held that mask so long. They need to take that mask off and actually be vulnerable to have a pure, fully connected relationship. And so that's what I believe the sexual mask to be. I think that's really what Lewis was referring to as well. Number 5 is the aggressive mask, kind of obvious. It's the violence, the argumentative mask. It's the manipulator, the victimizer, using aggression or passive aggression to show a sign of strength. If you ever go to any city in the UK on a Saturday night, you'll see many displays of the aggressive mask where guys have had too much to drink and they're just fighting it out, trying to show who's the man. Very dangerous, and with the current media, we're recording this in February 2018, so the current media is all around violence at the moment, gun violence in particular. The Joker is number 6. Now, I love humor. I like to be funny, and having read this now, this one spoke to me because I realized that actually I use humor and sarcasm to hide away from certain conversations. If the conversation is going in a certain direction that I feel uncomfortable with, I have used humor or sarcasm to hide away from that or to get out of it. When I was about 7, I witnessed a very serious car accident, and I think that would probably be my first ever traumatic experience, to witness that accident. And I didn't know how to handle that. I didn't know how to deal with trauma as a 7-year-old. But I do remember when I was telling my mother the story of the accident when we got home. She wasn't with us at the time. I was telling her the story, and I could remember myself smiling. And as a 7-year-old, I was confused because I was telling this serious story, but I was smiling at the same time. I now realize that I was feeling guilt. I was feeling shame about this accident somehow. That's how it had manifested for me. I didn't know how to express empathy. or sympathy. So I used this childish humor to sort of tell the story, and I think I was wearing that Joker mask even at 7 years old. The Invincible Mask, number 7. This is a classic. I won't show fear. So I rock climb, and often I talk about you must carry your fear on your shoulder. Fear's always going to be there. Just face your fears. And honestly, that's the Invincible Mask talking, because everybody has fear. And Lewis really gets into detail in that, talking about fear. And I think that everybody's guilty of using the Invincible Mask to sort of make other people feel weak, or other people feel smaller than you are. We use that mask to show our show of strength, that show I'm a man because I have no fear. Well, it is just the mask talking. And then number 8 is the know-it-all mask, using intellect and knowledge to make other people feel dumb or stupid. It sort of stands out like a sore thumb when somebody's telling a story, and the story is a lot about them, but it's also them showing how much they know about things. For me, that cries out validation. It cries out to me that they need validation. And that often, I think, comes from our fathers. Certainly, I've been guilty. And across all of these masks, Lewis talks about, he's guilty, probably more than most, of wearing all of these masks. So he doesn't come from a place of, I know more. He doesn't come from the know-it-all mask when he's writing this book. He's come from a place of, I'm the student here. We're all the students, and we all wear these masks. But to know that you're wearing them is the power. So yeah, the know-it-all mask is about trying to use intellect to win. It's a great way of showing your manliness. And then number nine finally is the alpha mask. The narrative of the alpha versus the beta. That's the beta meaning the lower, the smaller, the weaker. If you're a beta male, you aren't quite up to scratch. You're a bit of a pussy, you're a bit of a wimp, a bit of a nerd. It's the narrative that we've all grown up with, and I think that I'm sure it was purposeful that Lewis chose the stoic as number 1 and the alpha as number 9. Those two, for me, are the solid pillars of masculinity that has been sort of ingrained into us from childhood, is that we must be stoic and we must be an alpha male. If not, you're a pussy, basically, or you're weak, or you're not a man. That, I think, is the most important message that comes through from these masks and comes through from Lewis's writing, is that to break these masks down, to take them off, we need to step into uncertainty. We need to have the courage and the willingness to step forward and take off the mask and just try it out, to show our true self. So that true display of vulnerability is to think of the thing in your life that scares you the most and talk about it with somebody. So think of the thing in your life that scares you the most and talk about it with somebody, because that thing that scares you the most is your most vulnerable self. And if you can share that with one person, or even start to write it down, then that's a way of you starting to get in touch with who you are as a man. And Lewis talks on that when he talks about his own personal experience around trauma. Now, what do I think of this book? Well, you can probably tell already that I'm into the book. I really enjoyed the read. It's only 250-ish pages. It was quite easy to read. It's got good flow. Lewis writes from a point of view of his own experience, as well as pulling some statistics and also some facts in there as well. So it's written in a way that really resonated with me, and I think will resonate with many men and women who read it. So I would highly recommend this book. I think it's a great book, and if we can honestly send this kind of message through to more men, there will be less suicide in the world. There will be less violence and less mental health issues, mental wellness issues. So it's a relevant topic, and I think it's a great book to read, well written. And if Lewis, you are listening to this, if you were listening to this, thank you for writing it, and thank you for sharing yourself so vulnerably. I feel like I know you better, and I feel like we could have a conversation on this stuff, and it would be a really genuine and open conversation. So look, I recommend it. I will include a link below this video to go and buy the book. That is an affiliate link. I want to remind you that I am an Amazon affiliate. However, I'm not just recommending this book because of that. I genuinely believe this book is a great book to read. I only recommend books that I enjoy, that I've read myself, and that I think will resonate with people and that has good content. So this one's definitely in my top 10. Right, well, that's me. So I'm Paul Averill, the host of the Man Bits podcast. If you want to check that out, also check the link to the podcast below. Have a listen, see what you think. I'd love to hear your feedback, and let me know what you think of the book if you read it. So that's Lewis Howes, The Mask of Masculinity. Have a good day. Thanks all.